Hi, I'm Karen and I'm a rising senior at Homestead High School. I reached my final milestone for my main project, which is the IoT weather indicator. And for my final milestone, I made several more modifications and then I put everything together. So I switched from a 16 by 2 LCD to a 20 by 4 LCD for a bigger display. And for my modifications, I added several modes to display different things on the LCD. So in addition to the weather, I now have the time and date, a random quote of the day, and a random joke of the day. I added a button so that I can switch between these different modes, and then I also added a sensor so that when I wave my hand in front of it, it'll turn on and off. And then I also made another webhook so that using Twilio, I can send a text message to my phone at 7 a.m. every day that updates with the weather report for the day. So to demonstrate, the first mode is the weather, which says it's clear, 75 degrees Fahrenheit, and a 0% chance of rain. The second one shows the time and the date. The third one shows a quote, which is, "The less effort, the faster and more powerful you will be." And then the last one shows a joke, which is, "What did the ocean say to the beach? Thanks for all the sediment." And then for the sensor, if I wave my hand over it, it'll turn off. Yeah. And then if I wave my hand over it again, it'll turn back on. And then, so to go over the process, switching from the smaller LCD to the larger LCD, I had to change some lines of code, like the initialization, and then change the IP address so that, since it's a different LCD, and then change some of the syntax. For the modes, like I did with the weather, to get the weather information, I used webhooks for the quote and the joke to get a random quote and joke from a quote API and a joke API to display on the LCD. And then for the Twilio text message, I also used a webhook, but I had to use a post request instead of a get request, since I'm sending information and not receiving information. For the button, I created a variable for the mode, and then every time I press the button, it increments the variable, so then you can switch between the different modes. For the sensor, I connected it, and then it sends an ultrasonic pulse, and it returns the pulse when it reflects off an object. And then the echo pen receives this, and it uses the time between sending and receiving the pulse to calculate the distance between the sensor and the object. And depending on the distance, it'll turn the LCD display a NeoPixel on or off. And I learned a lot from this. I was able to learn more about LCD displays and how to display different things because I had to work with the different modes of display. I also learned how to use an ultrasonic sensor, which I hadn't used before, and I also was able to learn how to scroll text on an LCD and use a post request on a webhook. So the most challenging thing about this milestone was actually the LCD display, because it was printing from lines 1 to 3 and then 2 to 4, so I had to split up the lines and set the cursor for each one and then print line by line. And I also had to figure out how to loop them differently, because for the time display I had to continuously loop in order to have the seconds display, but for the weather I didn't want it to keep updating, so I created variables for each loop so that I could control each of those. And if I were to make another modification, I would probably make it more interactive. For example, I think having voice control would be cool, or I could use Twilio to instead have myself send a text message to get a response with the current weather outside. And overall, I had a good time at Blue Stamp. I really like the freedom and independence we got with our projects and to really personalize them. And thank you.